Hi there, and welcome to this video on GCSE Biology for the AQA specification, focusing on cell structure and in particular animal and plant cells. I'm Shumina from StudyMind, where we help you revise GCSE Biology with our helpful video tutorials, tailored to your subject, your specification, and to you. If you're new here, make sure you click the subscribe button. Whilst you are watching, please leave any comments below if you're unsure about anything, and let us know if it's your first time watching our videos so we can send you our free revision materials. We also have helpful timestamps below for each part of the video to help guide you through the specification. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to tutorial 2 of 6 on cell structure. And today we'll be looking at animal and plant cells. In the previous tutorial, we were looking at eukaryotes and prokaryotes and understanding the differences in the structures of both of these types of cells. So if you're still not too sure about this, perhaps go back to the last video and just give it a quick run through. So today we're going to be looking at animal cell structure, plant cell structure, bacterial cell structure, and comparing the three. And finally, we're going to compare their cell sizes. So these are the specification points for today's tutorial, so feel free to pause the video at this point, just make note of what you need to gain from this tutorial, and perhaps at the end you can come back and use this as a tick list, just to make sure that you understand everything that you need to know about for the exam. So first of all, let's take a look at animal cell structure. So we have our cell membrane, which you can see surrounding the cell and all the contents of the cell, which aren't drawn in yet, but as we progress through the tutorial, you'll see more contents being added in. So the cell membrane controls movement of substances into and out of cells. It completely surrounds the cell's cytoplasm. And the cell membrane is common to animal, plant, and bacterial cells. Next, we have the cytoplasm, which is the light blue shaded in part of this cell. And you can see how the cell membrane contains the cytoplasm within the cell. So the cytoplasm is a solvent in which chemical reactions can take place. So many enzymes are found in the cytoplasm. And like the cell membrane, it is also found across all three types of cell: animal, plant, and bacterial cells. So now let's take a look at the nucleus. So the nucleus houses the genetic material of the cells. Genetic material is vital to the life of an organism. So the nucleus is found in both animal and plant cells, but note that it is not found in prokaryotic cells, such as bacteria. And this is something we'll be looking further into later on in this tutorial. So we have our cell membrane containing our cytoplasm, and within our cytoplasm we have organelles, and the first of that we've covered is the nucleus. Now we're going to move on and look at these structures, which are the mitochondria. So the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It's the place where aerobic respiration occurs, producing energy needed for the cell to survive and function. They too are found in animal and plant cells. Now let's take a look at the last organelle that we're going to cover in animal cells. And that's our mitochondria. Sorry, not our mitochondria, that's what we just covered. It's our ribosomes. And you can see them over here. So the ribosomes are the site of protein synthesis in the cell. So I quite like to think of it as the protein factory of the cell. They're actually the smallest organelle in cells, and they're found in animal, plant, and bacterial cells, which illustrates just how important they are. So let's do a quick recap. Animal cells have a cell membrane, cytoplasm, nucleus, which houses the genetic material of the cell, ribosomes, which are the protein factory, and mitochondria, which are the powerhouse of the cell. Now let's compare this to a plant cell. So just take a look at this diagram. So notice between the last slide and this slide, we have those 5 structures that we've already covered. They are common in both animal and plant cells. But in addition, plant cells also have a cell wall.
And you can see this cell wall surrounds the cell membrane, so it's outside of the cell membrane. The cell wall is made of cellulose, which is a carbohydrate, and the function of the cell wall is to provide rigidity to the cell. Algal cells also have a cell wall. So now let's take a look at a second structure that is different between plant cells and animal cells, and that's this large structure in the middle of the cell that we've drawn here, and we call that the vacuole. So the vacuole contains sap, which is a mix of salts and sugars. It also helps to keep the cell turgid, which means keep it firm. And the last difference that we're going to draw upon here is that plant cells also contain these green structures, which are actually green in real life, called chloroplasts. So chloroplasts are the site of photosynthesis, which is required to make glucose for the plant. Chlorophyll in the chloroplasts absorbs light energy for photosynthesis. And actually, chlorophyll is a green pigment, and so plants are green, or leaves are green, because they contain this chlorophyll pigment. So let's just do a quick recap. So in the animal cell, we had our cell membrane, our nucleus, our ribosomes, our mitochondria, and our cytoplasm. But in the plant cell, we had 3 additional structures. They were the cell wall, that's number 1, vacuole, the second difference, and chloroplasts, the third difference. So those are the 3 differences between plant and animal cells. Now let's move on and have a look at bacterial cells. So bacterial cells have all of the organelles that plant cells do, except for a true nucleus, chloroplasts, or mitochondria. So, you can see the cell wall here. So we saw in the plant cell, the cell wall was made of cellulose. But in a bacterial cell, the cell wall is instead made up of peptidoglycan. But at the end of the day, the cell wall provides the same function. It provides rigidity to the cell. Now, something that I want you to remember from tutorial number 1 was that bacterial cells or prokaryotic cells tend to not have membrane-bounded organelles. And so you can see here, there's just free DNA floating around in the cytoplasm, whereas in the eukaryotic cell, the DNA is membrane-bound in a nucleus. So bacterial cells have DNA floating free in the cytoplasm, just as a loop of DNA. In addition, bacterial cells have single-stranded DNA, unlike DNA in a nucleus in eukaryotic cells, which is double-stranded. So this is a big exam tip, because examiners can easily ask you a question, something along the lines of, what's the difference between DNA in eukaryotes compared to prokaryotes? So there's 2 differences. Number 1 is that in prokaryotes, I kind of got a bit too excited there. In prokaryotes, the DNA tends to be free and not membrane-bound, so it's not contained in a nucleus, it's just free-floating in the cytoplasm. And also in prokaryotes, the DNA is single-stranded. So those are your 2 differences there. Right, so we've got our cell wall, our free-floating DNA, and we also have these green structures here, which are called plasmids. So plasmids are circular loops of DNA that just float around in the cytoplasm, similar to the loops of DNA that we came across earlier, except plasmids contain additional genes. So, this is actually a really useful way to recap what we've covered in this tutorial. So if you want to, pause the video at this point and try to perhaps complete this table by yourself, filling in the answers or perhaps ticking or crossing where a type of cell has a particular organelle or not. But if you're not too sure at this stage, then just go through it with me. So first of all, are the following cells eukaryotic or prokaryotic? Well, we know that both animal and plant cells are classified as eukaryotic cells, whereas bacteria are classified as prokaryotic. So we can fill it in as so. Unicellular or multicellular? Well, bacteria are almost always unicellular, and plant cells or plants tend to be multicellular, whereas animals can be either. Now on to the organelles. So all three have a cell membrane. Now with the nucleus, remember bacteria do not have membrane-bound DNA. So it's only bacteria that are not classified as having a nucleus. Cytoplasm-wise, all three have cytoplasm. And mitochondria-wise, animal and plant cells have mitochondria, but bacteria do not. Whereas all three types of cell have ribosomes. And that's because protein synthesis is really fundamental to cells. Now, cell wall, remember that plant cells do have a cell wall, and so do bacterial cells. But remember that one of the big differences between plant and animal cells is that animal cells do not contain a cell wall. Oh, and another good point to draw upon is that plant cells versus bacterial cells, yes, they both have cell walls, but plant cell walls are formed of cellulose, whereas bacterial cell walls are formed of peptidoglycan. So those are just the basic carbohydrates that make up the cell wall. But do remember that at the end of the day, they both come down to the same function, which is providing rigidity to the cell. Now, vacuole. Both plant and bacterial cells have vacuoles, whereas animal cells do not. And chloroplasts, of course animal cells don't have chloroplasts because they do not need to photosynthesize, and same with bacteria, whereas plant cells do have chloroplasts. So, that was a nice little summary table that I think you should probably get down in your notes. And now we're going to move on to look at the cell sizes of bacterial, plant and animal cells. So plant and animal cells are generally much larger than bacterial cells. So prokaryotic cells tend to be much smaller than eukaryotic cells, and that's something we briefly discussed in the previous session. So plant cells are around 10 to 100 micrometers long, and animal cells 10 to 30 micrometers long, and bacterial cells 0.5 to 5 micrometers long. So just to make that a little clearer for you, let's just write that out. So plant cells are 10 to 100 micrometers long, animal cells 10 to 30 micrometers long, and bacterial cells 0.5 to, put a bit clearer, to 5 micrometers long. And thus you can see that size-wise, plant cells are the largest type of cell, and bacterial cells are the smallest. And they really are very small. 0.5 to 5 micrometers is very tiny. Right, well that's all our specification points covered for today. If there was anything that wasn't clear, just go back, rewind the video, listen to it a few times, and hopefully it will make more sense. And that's all for today, so I will see you for tutorial number 3.
Thanks for watching this free video from StudyMind. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe to catch our newest videos by clicking below, and leave a comment on a topic you'd like a video on. Click here to watch more videos in our series for GCSE Biology, or visit our website studymind.co.uk for free past paper compilations by topic and specification.